Feed your body with CBD products through Heavy Metal Hemp, now offering award-winning, non-detectable CBD products by Green Roads, producers of the highest quality pharmacist-formulated CBD products on the market. The same award-winning CBD products found in health food stores, doctor's offices, juice and smoothie bars, wellness centers, and many other retail locations across America. Heavy Metal Hemp, now through September, is offering Skullsessions radio listeners $5 off each 1-pound bag of CBD coffee. All band members receive $15 off each 500 milligram CBD-infused muscle and joint heat relief bottles purchased through September. Feed your body with these and other quality CBD and other hemp products at Heavy Metal Hemp, where you will also find Shockwave's Skullsessions podcasts, music and hemp-related news, and where you can watch for music releases with reviews and more. Heavy Metal Hemp, where you can feed your body and mind. Just click on the Heavy Metal Hemp link on shockwavesskullsessions.com.
You are about to enter the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian. Okay, folks, let's get right to it. Here's part 2 of our interview with original Cro-Mags guitarist Parris Mayhew.
But he did the best he could. That was the deal he could get. And that deal got us to make Age of Quarrel and got us out there. Now, maybe it didn't, that album wasn't like a kill 'em all. It wasn't a launching pad, But the problem was, the real problem with the Cro-Mags, you can point the finger at Chris Williamson and Profile and anybody else. But the real true problem with the Cro-Mags is that we were all on the launch pad. And instead of embracing each other and being like, yeah, man, we did it. Let's all launch into the stratosphere together. Instead, everybody was trying to push the other person off the launch pad. And that's a goddamn shame. Yeah. But that's exactly how it happened. So, people in retrospect can point fingers at Chris or the label or any of these things, or drugs or any of the things that were obstacles to our success. But it was really us. All we had to do was cooperate. And I said that to Harley 1,000 times. I was like, dude, I'm begging you. I'm just begging you to just see the future. Stop bickering about imaginary shit. Most people, the crazy, if I could just sit here and give you a laundry list of the crazy shit that I've dealt with. But at the very end of the Revenge tour, when we broke up, if I told you why the Cro-Mags broke up, you would not believe me. But I'm going to tell you anyway. We were on tour, and there was this guy named Al Romano. He's a friend of mine now to this day. Me and Harley were only speaking through him. So if we wanted to talk to each other, we would call New York, we would talk to Al, and then Al would call the other person. And literally for months on tour, this is how we were communicating. It was unbelievable. And but Al would not tell Harley what I said. He would tell him whatever he felt like saying. And he would make shit up because he's just a fucking crazy guy. And I would tell Harley, I was like, this guy is making all this shit up. I'm telling you. And he had convinced Harley that I was stealing all the money as if there was any money to steal. I set up our business as a partnership. Every penny I earn, Harley earns. No matter how many songs I wrote, he gets the benefit of it. I made it a pure partnership, and there was no reason for any of that. But anyway, Albie was friends with this guy, Gidget, who used to be in Marilyn Manson. You know Gidget Keen, right? You know him.
Yes. I know him, yeah.
And yeah, he's a great guy. And he lived at Al's house for a long time. Al's a crazy guy. He collects these people. But anyway, I became friendly with Brad. And Brad was in New York. And so he called my cell phone. Back then you couldn't bring your cell phone on tour. It just didn't work. So I just left it home with my girlfriend. Brad called my cell phone. My girlfriend wrote down the message and called my tour manager and gave him the message. And the tour manager is giving the messages to everybody. And Harley's like, is that a message for Parris? What is it? Oh, Gidget Geen from Marilyn Manson left a message for Parris. What did it say? Oh, nothing. He just wants to talk to him. So Harley calls up Al in New York, and Al tells him, oh, I think Gidget and Manson are getting back together, and I think they want Parris to join. Like, he just does shit like this to act, because Harley is like playing with a cat with a laser pointer.
Did he do it just to antagonize him?
Yes, he just does it to fucking.
Wow.
Because Harley is like, he was playing Harley like a tune, and I told him, I'm like, dude, he's playing you like a tune. So anyway, based on this one phone message, Harley believed that I was going to quit the band at the end of the tour and join Marilyn Manson. So for another month, he didn't speak to me. And I'm like, and I'm talking to one of the opening band guys, and I'm like, he's like, why don't you and Harley talking? I was like, I don't know. I know it's because of something this guy in New York said. I don't know what it is. I can't imagine. It could be anything, because this guy is just like, he just loves toying with Harley. And Harley would never admit this.
Doesn't he know that's affected your career, though? I mean, the fact that he's fucking with Harley like this?
Or
did he not even care?
I know he's crazy.
Right.
Harley knows he's crazy. And I've had many conversations with Harley about this guy, because this guy, he's like, he would always be like, we would be hanging out, and he would say something like, oh, Parris, you're a pretty good guitar player, but I'm way better than you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I would go, oh, cool. And Harley would get mad at him, and Harley would start arguing with him. You can't say you're better. And I would pull Harley aside, because also this guy Albie helped us with like a lot of distribution. He like, we made almost $200,000 off of him, and I was like, he's a crazy dude. Just let him. I was like, why do you have to drag him out of his crazy bubble to believe that I'm a good guitar player? Let him be in his crazy bubble and think he's a great guitar player. Just let him do it. I mean, I had the same philosophy with Harley. I never tried to drag Harley out of his crazy bubble. I let him be in it, let him sit in his crazy bubble and be crazy. But with Albie, it was the same thing. But I used to tell Harley, I was like, this is who Albie is. I mean, we found out subsequently that Albie, he is a great guitar player. I went over his house one day, and he sat down on the guitar. I was like, oh my God, Albie, you're fucking great. He goes, I told you. Because he's nuts, but he's a super interesting guy, and he's a super talented guy, and I appreciate having a friend like him in my life, because I find him inspiring.
Sure. So
even though he played this role in breaking up the band, at the end I said to Harley, I said, listen, man, Albie is not breaking up the band. You are. You are the one who is deciding to believe this craziness. I am not joining Marilyn Manson. I've never met Marilyn Manson. I've never spoke to the guy, and I'm not interested in joining a band and playing somebody else's music. If you've known me all these years, you must know that.
That's great.
Yeah, and he was like, fuck you, motherfucker. I know what you're doing. He's so, I mean, like a life, if you spend your adolescence huffing glue, you think it's not going to have effect on your brain?
Right. But it is. I appreciate your honesty in telling that, especially about the business, because so many artists, and I know people that are artists that get delusional, and they always have to blame something. They always blame the record company or the agent, the manager, or someone, when it's really their fault. But it's always everyone else to blame. And so many artists, I know, tend to do that. But I do remember Chris when that album Age of Quarrel first came out, and when Rock Hotel first, they made that, hard rock branch of Profile Records, and he really did push the Cro-Mags. I remember I just had a small fanzine, and he used to call me up, and he was really pushing them. It's like, yeah, this band is great. So, I got nothing bad.
Chris did his best. He just, there's no school for this.
Right.
It's not like he went to school for this. Sure. He just decided, he's just like a hustler. He's a guy that makes things happen, and he made things happen the best he could. He worked to the peak of his ability. Then he hit a wall. There was just no place else. He just couldn't figure out anything for us to do. Things were always moving forward. He just made a lot of dumb mistakes. Like, one of the stupidest mistakes we ever made was when we put out Best Wishes, I wrote a treatment for a music video for The Only One, because it seemed to me like that would be the closest thing we'd ever have to like a rock single. And at the time, metal was really big on MTV and stuff like this. So I wrote the treatment, and because of the success of We Gotta Know, Profile actually agreed to make it. Wow. And they were going to give me money to make it, unlike the first one, which I made out of my own pocket. So me and Harley had just written this new song that ended up on Alpha Mega called Apocalypse Now. There was not even any lyrics to it. It was just music. But Chris got this fucking bug up his ass, like he believed this was the song that was going to break the band. I said, Chris, that's fine. In the next album cycle, we haven't even put out Best Wishes yet. It hasn't even come out yet. He's like, no, we should go into the studio and record this song right now and make a video for this song. And he went into Profile and he fought and he fought and he fought. And he got them so distracted that they thought we weren't making a video for The Only One. And the video for The Only One was never made because Chris was fighting to get a budget for us to record this song and make a video for it. Wow. I mean, to this day, it boggles my mind. Like the obstacles, the ideas, people, because people, they start believing, you hear this stuff like, this guy is like, the guy who signed this band or this one, they start bandying around words like creative A&R. And Chris wanted to be that. He didn't know what it was really, but he figured if you did something radical like that, it must fit under that category. So he came up with this cockamamie plan, and he totally fucked us. And that you could point at Chris, but all the other stuff, and Harley can point at Albie. And the funny thing is, here's another thing that is fucking funny. Before Harley did this whole lawsuit thing and put out this his new Cro-Mags EP or whatever, he maybe a year or two, I'm not sure because I don't pay that much attention, released a solo record, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was also called Cro-Mags.
Cro-Mags, yeah. Mm-hmm.
People always wonder why he does that. I know why he does. I know why he did it because there are abandonment issues with trademarks, and if you don't exercise a trademark,
right,
somebody can take it from you using the argument of abandonment. But if he puts out this record and just throws the logo on it, then he's exercised the trademark and it remains valid. That's why he did it. I don't. Everybody else has their own ideas about it, but that's why he did it. I know he did because he's married to a lawyer, and I handled all the trademark stuff for the band, so I understand that. But the guitar player on that recording was Al, the guy who broke up the band 10 years before.
Wow.
Wow.
Harley blames him for breaking up the band. He believes all that stuff he says about the Marilyn Manson thing, and then he gets him to play on his record. And
That's hilarious.
He's a fucking great guitar player.
Dude, you got to do a documentary about the Cro-Mags. If you could get all the members to
It's not possible.
It would be great, though. I mean, it would be a disaster, but that would.
I totally agree.
Great.
It would be a great one, but going back to all the crux of the problem, that has been the crux of the problem, is Harley is so attached to his own personal fiction that he cannot see outside of it, and he would never agree to have anybody tell the story if it doesn't come out of his mouth. During the Revenge era,
each person separately. And
he wouldn't understand why you would want to do that. And he would have to figure out a way to control that. I mean, back in the Revenge era, when I was doing a lot of writing, he was like, Parris, we should write a book together, which means I should write the book. Right. And then he could put his name on it, just like with the music on the last album. The album says produced by Parris Mayhew and Harley Flanagan. I produced the album.
Right.
100%. Harley was not even present. I 100% produced that album. And I remember being in the office up at Profile, and I'm sitting there with I'm not at Profile at Universal Music, and I'm sitting there with Scott Koenig, who was behind his desk, looking very regal like he does, because Koenig means king. And he had like one of his little like peons who, like, I don't even know what he did. He was just always running around the office. And we were talking about the album credits, and everybody in the office knew I produced the album because I was coming back and forth. I was putting Harley through vocal training. I was, sending in mixes. I was the only person they were communicating with. And then we were talking about the album credits. And he overheard me say, well, it'll say all songs written and produced by Parris Mayhew and Harley Flanagan. And the guy looked at me and he goes, why would you put Harley's name on there as producer? And I said, because it's more important to be in control than to appear to be in control. And that's why there will never – Harley said he cannot have the album say produced by Parris Mayhew because he can't have people believing that I produced him. And if there was ever a film made, absolutely, you hit it right on the nose. It would have to be told like the way Johnny Rotten's first book was, where he brings in other voices. Like Johnny Rotten would tell a story, and then he'd bring in two other people tell the exact same story, but it was totally different, which I commend him on, because that's a great way to tell a story. Mm-hmm. And it would be spectacular to have John Joseph stand there and say, yeah, I started the band. I'm the original singer. And then me show footage of Eric Casanova at CBGB's playing the first two Cro-Mags gigs. Well, how do you explain these two gigs that we played before you were there? I mean, it would be retarded.
Right.
John probably would not even participate, because it's funny, because John came to me maybe 3 or 4 years ago. He didn't come to me. He had a mutual friend, Doug Crosby, reach out to me and set up a meeting. And I was like, this is weird, because for years I would see him in clubs. Like, he's telling everybody, man, if I ever see that Parris, man, I'm going to fuck him up. And by the way, whenever I imitate Harley or John, it's the same voice, so don't get confused. Fuck that motherfucker up. So I would see John in clubs, at Irving Plaza or whatever, and I would walk right up to him, and I would put out my hand, and I would say, hey, John, how you doing? Because, the truth is, we should be friends. We should shake hands when we see each other, and we should revel in our mutual pride. But we don't do that. But I just do it kind of just to irk him, and he would always be like, "Oh," and get all bent out of shape. So when he reached out, when Doug called me up and said, "Hey, John wants to meet you," I was like, "Why?" He says, things have gone too far, and he feels like he wants to apologize to you. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know if I believe that, but if it will give us a temporary truce or give us a chance to clear the air, I'd be happy to do it. And so I went and met with Doug and John at this coffee shop in Brooklyn. And John sat down, and just like he said, he immediately went into this apology. He goes, I've tried to downplay your contribution, and when I saw you in public, I didn't shake your hand, and I talked a lot of shit, and I'm sorry about that, and I'd like it if we could just maybe leave it behind. And Doug looked at me, and I looked at him, and Doug said, "Okay, I'll leave you guys alone." And I was like, wow, I'm very glad to hear this. If anything, it's at least when we see each other, we can shake hands. And I repeated the sentiment I said to you. We have this great mutual past that we should be proud of, and we should be proud of it together, And then he immediately launched into how he wanted me to write a Cro-Mags album for him. And I was like, of course. It couldn't just be being nice. And he was like, yeah, man, like the guys I play with. I go, you mean the Cro-Mags? Yeah, the guys I play with, they just don't really write songs. And I said, well, even if they did write songs, they wouldn't be Cro-Mags songs.
Right.
Well, he goes, well, that's my point. So I was thinking, like, maybe you could write an album. And I looked at him, and, I don't. You'd have to know me. It's like if somebody makes a recommendation, my brain sees 3 years down the road, and I just looked at him and I said, well, what I would consider is that there are 2 songs left over from the Revenge album that don't have vocals on them. As a test, I would give you those songs. You can write lyrics to them. We can go into the studio, record them, release them as an EP, do some shows, and if we all get along and it goes smoothly and is productive, I will consider the idea. I didn't say I will. I said I would consider writing an album. But the first thing we would have to do is fire all these people you call the Cro-Mags. Right. And I assemble a band that would be capable of performing the songs that I write. And then he's just like, you could see his face just like droop. He was like, oh, like he was floundering. Like all of a sudden, like they turned off the gravity in the Enterprise and he was floating to the ceiling. And he looked at me, he goes, well, I was just hoping that like me, you and Mackie could like get in a room like we used to do in the old days and just write some songs. And I looked at him and I said, John, you've been telling your horseshit fiction for so long, you actually believe it. Me, you, and Mackie never got in a room and wrote songs together. Me and Harley wrote the songs. We arranged them. We brought them in. Harley showed Mackie how to play the drums to them. And if there were lyrics written already, we would teach you how to do it. I mean, again, I don't want to diminish John's contribution because he certainly wrote some great lyrics. But there was never this fictional thing where we got into a room and wrote together. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I said, so I'm not going to agree to do something that we never did in the past. And why would I do that anyway? It wouldn't be constructive. I would write the songs. I would show the drummer that I chose how to play it. And it certainly wouldn't be Mackie. He was just kind of like sitting there across from me, dumbfounded. I was like, just think about it. I said, I'll think about it, which is more than I would have thought I would do a half an hour ago. I'm not saying I'll do it. but I'd think about it. You should think about it. And then I said to him, oh, and he also said, well, if we don't do this, I'm going to finish out the last couple of gigs that I have booked, then I'm just going to stop doing the Cro-Mags. And I said, well, that's great, because I've never said it out loud, but I 100% disapprove of what you're doing, because you going out there and representing yourself as the Cro-Mags is a fraud. It's just not right, and I don't approve of it. It's like when you go into a deli and you go into the refrigerator and you take a Coke out. If you pop it open, you take a sip, and there's lemonade in there. It might taste all right, but it ain't Coca-Cola.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's why we have names for these things. Mm-hmm. And if you put the name Cro-Mags on a bill, and a fan comes and dishes out his good hard-earned money to see the Cro-Mags, and he doesn't see the Cro-Mags, you're ripping off the fans. And he was like, oh. So we shook hands. He left, and the first thing he did was go online and say, I just spoke to Parris, and he agrees that me and Mackie were original members, and we have the right to play the song.
Wow. Damn.
And it's like, why did you waste my time? And then, of course, the feud was back on, like the next time I saw him. It was all next, all that kind of stuff. But that's the kind of thing I deal with. It's like people always say, why don't you guys just reconcile? I said, because reconciliation requires openness and honesty. People got to come to the table. They have to. And the other thing I said to him was, if we do this, the first thing you have to do is you have to go in public, in interviews, online, on your Facebook, on everything else, and tell the truth about how you told everybody that 20 years ago I ratted you out to the military because he was AWOL from the Navy, which is total horseshit that he made up. And he just looked at me and was like, what? I said, in order for us to move forward, you have to confess to your lie. And he was like, well, what does that have to do with anything? I said, it has everything to do with it. You have presented this fiction that I ratted you out to the military. He told everybody that he was in a military prison in D.C., and they actually threw a benefit concert in New York City to raise bail him out. All right? I hope the significance of that sinks into somebody. But if not, I will explain it to you. There is no bail in military prison. When you're in military prison, you don't have the same rights as a regular criminal who can be bailed out. So they threw a benefit in New York City, raised money, and sent it down to John, and he just put it in his pocket. Wow. Is exactly right. And the people he fooled, the Jimmy Gestapos and all the people that threw that benefit and played at that show, he tricked them, and nobody talks about it.
Many different things.
Well, he uses the same con. I mean, 20 years before that, he organized a benefit at Danceteria, which was a benefit for the squat. The benefit scam is nothing new. And there was this benefit for the squat, and Cro-Mags played, and many other bands played, and all this money was raised at Danceteria. And then like a week later, the squat burned down. Wow. And John just kept the money.
And I know he's doing those walking tours, the New York City walking tours.
I don't know if I have an opinion about it. If I am very fortunate in that I have a number of talents that I can monetize. Mm-hmm. I have a degree in fine arts. I was I was on the art director path, and when I discovered music, and then I put out a record and had a lot of success. And when I left the music business, I didn't just flounder around. I immediately transitioned into the film business and made a career for myself. And I'm like sitting in my house that I bought with the money that I make, working in the film business. I'm working right now on a television show called Katie Keene, which is a spin-off of Riverdale, which is a super successful television series. And this is the kind of thing I do. I work on movies. I did that movie Den of Thieves with Gerard Butler and 50 Cent, and I did A Dog's Purpose. And I did 2 seasons of Blue Bloods and 2 seasons of The Americans. I have a marketable skill.
Sure.
If I did not have a marketable skill and I found myself standing on a street corner with no education like John Joseph, maybe I would make up stories about my old band so I can continue playing. Yeah. And I might do walking tours. Mm-hmm. So, and that sounds a little harsh, but it's not even harsh. I'm just trying to put myself on that street corner with John and doing these walking tours. I can imagine that the walking tours could be fascinating. John is not a fascinating person, so I would imagine the money wouldn't be well spent.
Well, I mean, now, the Cro-Mags, obviously, you've got now 2 versions, right? You've got the Cro-Mags JM and then Harley's version. And what's interesting, Bob actually had done a DVD about a year or so ago called Band versus Brand, which kind of, he addresses, this same situation with bands, like a lot of those LA glam bands like Rat, Great White, LA Guns, even 70s psych rockers, Hawkwind, they all, same thing, all two versions of these bands. I got to imagine that's kind of probably infuriate you even a little more.
I don't really get infuriated anymore. I was infuriated when I first heard Alpha Omega, and I realized that Harley had stolen music that I spent a year writing and didn't credit me for it. That infuriated me. I've had so many blows in the past that everything that happens now, it's like I'm just so numb from scar tissue that I just don't feel it anymore. But the whole the thing of John touring as the Cro-Mags for as long as he did bothered me more than anything, because Harley all along had the power to stop it. About 8 years ago, I let the trademark lapse. And it's funny, for about 2.5 years, I had to-do lists all over my office. And like number 6 was like, register the trademark for Cro-Mags. And it just wasn't important to me at the time. And so I never did it. And in that lapse, Harley registered the trademark. And I knew about it, and I was like, hey, whatever. I also got the impression that Harley never was going to use it, that he wasn't going to do another Cro-Mags. And then John's, had started and stopped many times, and John had started up again. All Harley had to do was send out notifications to clubs to stop them. Although trademark law is very complicated, most people don't realize it. You think, your band name is Slayer, and everybody just respects that, and you can just trademark and it's done. But it's not that simple. Trademarks are regional.
Yeah.
You have to get a trademark for every country in Europe, Australia, Japan, the United States, Canada, Mexico. Every territory you have to register the trademark. Then, if anybody violates the trademark, you have to retain a law firm in that territory. So you have to give them a retainer. So if you have a band that is like John's band going and playing, 8 countries in a row, that means you have to retain 8 law firms. That's, at least $40,000 right there. And then if they were supposed to enforce an injunction, that would be like at least another $10,000 in each territory. Now, the problem also is these law firms do not go after John. They have to go after the club, because the club is the one that's actually infringing the trademark by advertising the show. So now you're making enemies of the clubs. Okay. The clubs don't understand, because half the clubs or the promoters are just some knucklehead kid in the middle of bumfuck Germany who wants to see a show. So he gets his friends all together, and next thing you know, he's a concert promoter, and he's just not going to understand. So it's so complicated that you have to deal with destroying the career of a local promoter. Like one show gone wrong could destroy them. Never let them do another show. You know what I mean? Even though they're in the wrong, they don't know they're in the wrong. It's just John puts the promoter, he puts me, he puts Harley, puts everybody in this very terrible position, while he just sits back and smiles because he knows that there's really nothing that can be done about it. So that's why I didn't renew the trademark, because I didn't want to make a career of policing the name Cro-Mags, especially when I realized after Revenge there would never be another Cro-Mags album. Or at least I thought. I knew there would never be another one with me. But now, this phenomenon of having this JM and this Harley version, obviously Harley has gone full force with it. And I think to a large extent it's just because of John doing it all these years. He just wants to erase that. He's like, he's so territorial. He's like, I got to take it back. But anyway, with the two, I firmly believe, because John has, he resigned the name to being just like another band, another name on the bill. Like I see like the Kingsland in New York, which is a teeny little hole in the wall. It's basically a bar. And the Cro-Mags name is the opening act for other bands, other local New York bands. And I'm like, what the fuck? The last gig I played was in front of 180,000 people in Germany. It's like, and he's resigned, and Harley, he's doing this thing with playing all these shows with the Misfits. And I want to be like, wow, Harley's finally gotten the band where they belong. First on the bill. He's playing stadiums, 40 people. People like that went to the shows would take pictures of the audience while they were playing, and there's like 20 people, because it's a stadium show. I went to the LA Forum show. I went to the Jersey show with the Misfits. There wasn't anybody in the room until the Misfits came on. Then it was like unbelievable. Right. But my thinking is this: John's version is going to fizzle and fade away, because if you were a promoter in Europe and you were promoting a festival and you wanted names on there to sell tickets, would you want Cro-Mags JM or would you just want Cro-Mags? I know that sounds like a small distinction, but I think slowly the competition of having something that appears authentic because it doesn't have some tag moniker on it will eventually put John in a position where he's just not going to sell any tickets. He's not selling any tickets anyway. People, because people know what they're getting. They're getting basically a cover band. And also promoters are getting tired of it. I've had a number of promoters contact me just because maybe it's just for venting or people just know that I'm kind of a normal guy that they can talk to. But promoters I don't even know will email me and be like, oh my God, we just booked this John Joseph thing. And I know I shouldn't have done it. And I know I shouldn't be whining to you, but it's like he did this thing where when they showed up, he said, John said, will you sell T-shirts for us? Our T-shirt guys in here. So, the promoters, again, like just some young kid, like wanting to have, of course, I'll help the Cro-Mags, blah, 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 gets one of his friends to sell T-shirts. And at the end of the night, John says, all the T-shirts are gone and we're $300 short. You owe me $300. And then he basically says he'll fuck up the kid that sold the T-shirts if the promoter doesn't give him an extra $300. So the promoter gives him an extra $300 so his friend doesn't get his ass kicked. And then they go on their way, and this promoter speaks to 5 other promoters and finds out that he did the same thing the night before and the week before at another club. And it's just his routine. It's the same number. It's always $300. He always asks him to sell T-shirts. And he's got this. It's like it's not even enough that he's out there playing music. He's also got he can't turn off the scam.
Well, it just gives the whole Cro-Mags the whole just a bad name for it. I mean, because Cro-Mags, like you said, it started out as something so great and so cool. And just to see it bastardized like this, it's pathetic. It really is.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, it's real sad.
It is.
And you can't even imagine what it was like. Like when we were touring on Age of Quarrel, sometimes, kids would say, oh, come, we have a big house, come stay at our house. And we'd go stay at their house and John would steal their stuff. Jeez, and he would do this thing where he would take something, I don't even know what he would take. He would just take something that he wanted. And he would take a Hare Krishna pamphlet and put it into place. And he would do it as he had this whole presentation of how he would do it. Like he would pick up the thing and put the Hare Krishna booklet there, like he was bestowing them with a gift. And I'm like, what are you doing? These people are putting us up. He's like, man, I am increasing their karma. I go, what? They don't even know it. But when they read that book, it's going to increase their karma. I said, but what about the thing you just put in your pocket? What does that have to do with their karma? He goes, I am helping them. And that was his thing. He would just rip people off and say he was doing it to increase their karma. He goes, because I'll take this and I'll sell it and I'll give some money to the Hare Krishna temple and that will increase their karma. Okay, so I had to live with that back then. So when it came time to push him out of the band before we recorded Best Wishes, it wasn't even a choice. I mean, I already knew this guy was just a total shitbag. Me and Harley had built this thing. It was fucking fantastic, man. Me and Harley were so proud of it. And then John came in the band. And the first thing he did was he wasn't really contributing as a great singer. I mean, I know people like his voice, but he probably even himself didn't view himself as a great singer. I'm trying to put myself in his own head and why he did the things he did. So he tried to create something that made him important in the band. So he converted Harley into this Hare Krishna thing. And then he literally molded Harley to the point where he was like, Parris is not one of us. And that's what created the great wedge between me and Harley, was John doing that. And it's such an unintelligent thing to do. If you go into a thing like the Cro-Mags, a phenomenon, and you don't recognize what it is that made it the phenomenon, and then you try to splinter it, it's just dumb.
Yeah,
it really is just dumb. But in his music, I don't think he understood music enough to realize. He just thinks it's some magical thing.
Yeah.
And it's also for the same reason why he didn't take direction. Or I must have said it 1,000 times. I could have guided John to a great vocal performance on Best Wishes, but he wouldn't ask for help. And whenever you tried to help him, he fought it. And I don't think he fought it for any other reason, was that he didn't understand that there's 7 notes and there are certain chords that you can play certain notes over and they sound good. To him, that was just a complete and utter mystery. With Age of Quarrel, everything was like, we even joked, me and Harley wanted to call the first album Cro-Mags in the Key of E, because it's just like riding the E string in every song. And half the vocal melodies were handed to him on a silver platter. I mean, it's very similar to the phenomenon is similar to Henry Rollins and Black Flag when they did Damage. Damage is a masterpiece. I love that album. I listen to it this day, but that album was handed to Henry on a silver platter, and the next Black Flag album stunk, in my opinion. Same thing with the Crumbsuckers. Dave wrote all the lyrics for the first Crumbsuckers album, and then he got pushed aside, and Chris came in, and he sang this fantastic fucking album. First Crumbsuckers album, fucking masterpiece. Second Crumbsuckers album, not so much. Mm-hmm. But the same phenomenon happened with John. But when it came down to doing Best Wishes, it was like this combination of things. Like, how hard am I going to try to help this guy who's ripping off our fans, who's splintering the band, and won't listen when we're trying to help him? And his singing was just so dreadful on the album that I was constantly like having meetings with Petey alone. I'd have meetings with Harley alone. I wouldn't bother with Doug because Doug was barely in the band anymore at that time because he was so fucked up on drugs that he wasn't like, we didn't have him participate in voting. He was like, Harley didn't even want him in the band anymore. But oddly enough, the funny thing is I was the one who kept him in the band. I kept fighting for him to stay in the band. But ultimately, when I realized that John did not realize that he could be guided to a good vocal performance, it was just it wasn't a battle worth fighting. I thought Harley would be a good singer, so I pushed for that.
Yeah. What a story, dude.
Yeah, no doubt. And I definitely want to also, talk about some of your other music that you've put out over the years. I know, once Alpha Omega came out, and it is interesting because when I first listened to that album, my first thought is like, wow, this guitarist really did a great job of emulating Parris Mayhew's guitar style and his riffs. And then, of course, come to find out, you indeed wrote a lot of the music for that album.
When we finished touring with Best Wishes, Petey was done. He just left. And Doug was so fucked up on drugs that we didn't consider him anymore. So it was me and Harley. We still had Chris Williamson. Chris Williamson set up auditions, and we had like one of those like casting calls where 1,000 guitar players came down. And I know they videotaped Kiss's auditions and Metallica's auditions, and they're really humorous, but ours was equally as humorous. But one person that stood out was a 17-year-old kid named Rob Buckley. And Rob Buckley ended up getting the gig. And he was young and full of fire, and he liked Dokken, so he played, different kinds of chords than we did. Chords that Harley used to always say, like whenever I used to play a riff that had like anything that wasn't a bar chord, Harley would go, "Why are you playing them Christmas chords?" So Rob knew some Christmas chords, and Harley, I don't know what it was, but like he just, we had been, John was gone. Harley was immersed in this Hare Krishna thing, so there was still this kind of wedge between us, but he knew well enough that it was our partnership that should continue in some shape or form. So we were continuing. And but me and Rob just basically sat in his mom's house for about a half a year and hashed out almost the entire Alpha Omega album. The one song, The Other Side of Madness, which is like the metal song that they released as a single, I wrote that during the Best Wishes period. And Harley just never wrote lyrics to it, so it didn't end up on Best Wishes. And then it just kind of got brushed to the side. I didn't even like it. It wasn't even one of the songs that me and Rob Buckley and Harley were playing when we were writing the Alpha Omega album. So me and Rob sat and we wrote this entire album, and we would invite Harley every time, and he would never come. He was dealing pot in Central Park or whatever. And he would always say to me, like, it's the kind of thing, sociopaths say. They just try to diminish everything you're doing. He's like, "Don't get so in love with all that shit you and Rob are writing, because I've already written an entire album and it's going to change musical genres." And I'm like, okay, well, I've never heard any of this genre-bending music, but I'd love to hear it. Why don't you come down to Rob's house and play it? But, of course, we never heard any of those songs because it didn't exist. He was just trying to belittle what we were doing. So we started demoing these songs, and we did a full demo of almost every song on Alpha Mega. And then we decided to go out on tour. And Alec Peters, who was a friend and record executive character out there, good friend of the band, found us this Dave DiCenzo. So we went out on tour. We did like 2 weeks playing. And the idea was to test out the Alpha Mega material. And Harley we rehearsed it as soon as we get on stage. Like, I'm not playing that way. They want to hear Age of Quarrel. I'm like, yeah, but we're not doing this to play Age of Quarrel. We're doing that to practice this new material. And he just like totally fought us. And he became such a dickhead on tour that the very last gig, we drove from like DC to New York. Everybody in the band, the T-shirt guy, the tour manager, Harley's girlfriend, we all rode in the T-shirt van. So we wouldn't be on the tour bus with him because he was just being such a fucking asshole. And we played our last gig at Lemoore. Biohazard opened up for us, and they fucking kicked ass, blew us away because we just weren't together on stage. We were like all standing at opposite sides of the stage. Harley was standing in the middle, just being a not nice person. And when the show was over, I just walked off stage. I went down into this little dressing room. It had a lock on it, and I closed the door and locked it. Because I just didn't even want to talk to him. Because me and Rob had already decided we wanted to quit. We were just like, we've written this entire album all by ourselves. He didn't participate at all. Let's just take the music, make a record, and leave him behind. So that was decided. We were going to play this last gig. So Harley comes down into the dressing room and like he kicks the door open of the room I'm in. And he just comes in, and the room's only like 8 feet wide, and he's pacing back and forth, pacing back. And he's kicking the walls, and he's spitting. And he tears the door off the wall, and I'm just sitting there looking at him, and he just stormed out. I was just like, there's nothing even to think about. Like, what is he so mad about? We got a whole album written. Everything's great. You know, to me, it was always like that. It's like, I always felt like we were on the launching pad and everything should be smiles. And it was just never that way with him. So me and Rob the next day just quit. And then, Century Media contacted Harley, you know, with this premise of bringing John back or bringing the Cro-Mags back together. And Harley kept chasing after me, trying to get me to do it. And I was just like, I just didn't want to do it. And I didn't think it was a race, you know, because I never would have imagined in my wildest fucking dreams that somebody would steal that music, that somebody would record somebody else's music and put their name on it. I just could not in my wildest fucking dreams imagine that. But I'm not in Harley's head. And he went into the studio and he not only recorded all the songs that we demoed that me and Rob wrote, but he went back through our riff tapes and ideas and he recorded everything that he could remember that I wrote. And one of those things was the song The Other Side of Madness, which ended up being the single on that album. I wrote that song years ago. Harley never wrote lyrics to it. He stole it. The album came out. That was the most devastating blow to me in my entire life. I've been stabbed. I got hit by a cab. Nothing was like this, you know, just, I can't even say it. So like this whole thing of like, oh, JM, Cro-Mags, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't even affect me anymore. That was the most terrible, devastating thing. And it was terrible for Rob too. You know, like he must've been 18 or 19 by the time this happened. And this was his first experience in the music business. And I think it just wrecked him, which I mean, I would say that it's crazy that he did that, but it's crazy that I did it. Yeah. But it was just one of these things where like, I was walking around the Lower East Side one day with this was, you know, after, you know, they put out Alpha Mega and they went on tour and apparently John and the band mutinied against Harley. They kicked him out of the band and they toured without him. And Harley started doing heroin, and he was like living on the streets in New York. People were like, oh, I saw Harley sleeping on the subway on 14th Street. Oh, I saw Harley in the park. You wouldn't even recognize him. One day, me and my girlfriend were walking down the street, and I just heard this voice go, Parris. And I look over, and there's this like bum standing there with this like ratty, nasty coat and a beard and like a hat. And like, but through the beard and through the hat, I could see his eyes. And if you know Harley, and if you've ever stood next to him, he's got very individual eyes like nobody else has eyes like him. And I could see those eyes looking through this dirt and filth. And he was like crying. He goes, I can't believe I'm talking to you. He goes, I can't believe I can't talk to you anymore. And I grabbed my girlfriend by the shoulder and I pushed her like on the other side of me. And I was like, go down the block. Like, get away. Cause you don't know what this guy is capable of. So he's going down the block and he's just standing there weeping. And he's like, Parris, I can't talk to you. He goes, I've been following you. I go, he goes, you live in Hoboken. He goes, I waited the PATH train to see you come out and to go home. He goes, I just want to talk to you. He goes, I'm not trying to get you to play with me. We're not friends anymore. He goes, I cannot believe I found myself in a place in my life where we're not friends anymore. Of course, that was Harley doing his imitation of a human being. And he convinced me to give him my phone number, or my pager number at the time. And he began talking to me, and I would meet him in the street and we would walk around. He was playing me tapes. Like, apparently at some point Michael Alago had given him a demo deal at Elektra, and he recorded 5 songs. And
wow, in his condition?
He would make me listen to these demos, and they were like really scattered, like just parts, like nothing made any sense. Singing would just stop and start, and there were no choruses. It was just, but the riffs were good. It was just this, and he was like, what do you think? I was like, it's great. I said, is Michael signing you? He's like, no, he already passed on me. And I ran into Michael around that time, and I said, I heard that you signed Harley. And he's like, yeah, I always believed in him, which is funny, It's like another person who singles out him as the credit, like if you enjoy the phenomenon of the Cro-Mags, to grab one part of it, but he learned, he made a demo, and it wasn't what he expected. It wasn't, Age of Quarrel. And he said, he basically put it in a context that, I've thought about many times. He said, Harley just does not have what it takes. And that was it. It was no long explanation. He was like, Harley just does not have what it takes. It's self-saboteur and all this other stuff. So anyway, Harley went off to California or something, and he kept calling me because he had my phone number. And then at some point, I was up at Def Jam, and Leor Cohen, the CEO, the guy who owns Def Jam, the guy who ran Def Jam, he said to me, he goes, he's a big Israeli guy,
right?
6'4", piercing blue eyes, very intense guy, lovely person. He's like, Parris, because I was directing music videos up there. I was in his office. He's like, Parris, I signed these artists, and they all say my favorite band is the Cro-Mags. I go, oh, that's great. He goes, if you guys got back together, you get signed in a second. And I was like, well, don't you see the irony of this conversation? He goes, but. I go, you're the CEO of Polygram Music, the biggest record company in the world. So why don't you put your money where your mouth is? And he said, what do you want? I said, well, I made him Russian now, but he's Israeli. I do a lot of the same voices for people. But he goes, what do you want? I said, give me 10 grand and I'll make a demo. He goes, okay, cut me a check right there. And like I said, Harley had been calling me continuously at this time. So I called him up. He was living on the streets in San Francisco, pushing a cart around with like fucking horns on it, like a bull horns. At least this is what somebody in California told me. And I said, listen, I will play. I will get together with you, but I'm not going to San Francisco. I'll meet you in LA. We'll get a place to stay. And it turned out that Harley had a friend who was growing marijuana in this house in the hills of Sunland. And he had a basement with all the instruments. So we met there, and we spent a couple of months, and we wrote 5 of the songs that were on Revenge. And I went back to New York with the tapes, and I went up to Leor and I said, here's the tapes. He signed us, and he gave us a fucking boatload of money to make Revenge. I also didn't mention that those 4 months that we spent in the house writing the songs, I basically locked Harley up and got him clean off heroin, because he was like full on addict, but he was clean. And we recorded the demo. We went to New York. We recorded, at Normandy, where we did Best Wishes. I wanted to keep things the same. Harley was like, we should change tunings and do a jazz jam. And I'm like, oh God. I said, know what we got to do? We got to do exactly what we do. We're going to do it exactly the way we do it. We're going to record it where we recorded before, and we're going to deliver it. We're not going to do any jazz jams, you know. And he was like, and I don't think I should repeat any lyrics. I just want it to be free form like jazz. And I was like, no, that's not a song. A song is repeated lyrics. That's what a song is. Chorus, verse, you're going to do that. Finally got him past, you know, like, you don't have any idea what the day-to-day obstacles. Every day he's got some cockamamie idea about how we should do things different. And I have to spend months talking him out of it. It was just insane. So anyway, we got signed. And
wasn't that White Devil? Wasn't that what you guys were signed to Def Jam when you guys did White Devil together?
When we were signed, we had decided that we want, you know, because John had been playing as Cro-Mags JM and Malfunction and Cro-Mags, and like all this, like it had all become a little vague. And I wanted it to return to a clear identity of me and Harley making music, and just calling it the Cro-Mags wouldn't do that anymore. You know, so I thought it would be a good idea to have a new name. So we were in Sunland, we were watching TV, and we were watching Malcolm X, the movie, the Spike Lee film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The second half is excellent. But all throughout the movie, you kept hearing somebody say, "Oh, that White Devil." And both of us would laugh, you know, like it's such a funny, you know, antiquated, you don't hear it very often. It just sounded funny. Mm-hmm. So we thought we would call ourselves White Devil. And then, of course, the ultimate irony is getting signed to Def Jam, a primarily black label, with the name White Devil. And Russell Simmons loved the name. He was like, I can't believe I'm signing a band called White Devil. And Hank Shockley, the guy who produced Public Enemy, wanted to produce our album. He's like, I'm going to produce the White Devil. So it's like they thought it was the greatest thing in the world. But we did the demo, and Scott Koenig, our A&R guy over there, wanted us to go out and test the material the same way we did with the Alpha Omega material. And we went to Europe, and we did a little tour. Immediately, we saw that the name White Devil wasn't okay. Like people just, it's not that it wasn't okay because it wasn't okay. It's because we live in this PC sense of humor world, and people in Europe were really, really bent out of shape about it. But that didn't change our mind. We came back to New York, and one day I was just sitting there, and I just envisioned like some 15-year-old kid coming home at 1:00 in the morning on the subway wearing a White Devil t-shirt and getting beaten to death, or some redneck on America's Most Wanted who's wanted for like dragging a black person on the back of his pickup truck wearing a White Devil t-shirt. Mm-hmm. You know, because they'll, you know, people attach their own, you know, 10 people can look at a Devil t-shirt, and one guy will laugh, and Hank Shockley and Russell Simmons will giggle, and then another guy, his forehead will crunch, and in the corners of his mouth will go up, and he'll smile to himself, but he's not smiling for the same reason we are. And that's just the kind of thing I couldn't subscribe to. So that name went by the wayside.
Okay.
And then what ultimately happened was when Universal purchased Def Jam, everybody got fired. It was like a major transition. And they merged all these record labels, Polygram, Mercury, Def Jam. It became the biggest music conglomerate in history. Mm-hmm. And so they fired everybody. Like literally everybody got fired. And the only person that was on top was Leor Cohen. Leor Cohen became the president, the CEO of the whole shebang, which we thought was great. So we sat around basically for 2 years waiting for our record to be released and for this merger to be settled. And by the time they had hired all these new executives, the new A&R guy, this guy Jeff Fenster, who was recently brought down by the Me Too movement, he basically said, I don't know if you know how A&R works, but if an A&R guy signs an artist and they break, he makes a percentage. So all these artists that were signed before the merger by different A&R men, I have no interest in breaking those bands because I'm not going to make any money on it. Right. So Polygram dropped almost 400 artists.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you've got to write a book, Parris. That's all I got to say. Yeah. I mean, those other two got books out, but I don't think this is going to compare to what you're telling us on this podcast, man.
But the story is way more interesting than the fiction. Instead of trying to weave some revisionist history just to place yourself in a fictional place in the past, why not just actually tell these stories? Because that's the thing that's fascinating to me. Like that whole story I just told you about what our experience with Def Jam was like, to me, that's the interesting part of the phenomenon of being in a band. You'll do anything you can. For me, all I cared about was the music. I was 100% invested. But I'll tell you, when I was standing at the Acropolis in Greece, in Athens, we were on tour. It was like the very end of the Revenge era touring, when me and Harley hadn't spoken to each other in months, but we had spoken to each other that morning when we were about to fly to Greece. The promoter from the Greece show was going to pick us up at the airport and take us to the Acropolis because he's Greek and he was proud of it and he thought we'd love to see it. And I would love to see it. Of course, I was like, this is the greatest thing. I was like, I don't want to go to the Acropolis. I don't want to go look at a bunch of old rocks.
Sounds like Fred Sanford.
You can go to the beach in anywhere. We're going to see like these amazing megalithic things that nobody can explain and fascinating, beautiful. It's the joy of being alive. Let's go look at this stuff. Oh, fuck it. So we land and the promoter just takes us straight to the Acropolis. So they didn't really have any choice. Harley and his like sour puss girlfriend. Boy, they made a great couple. They were just like two fucking negative ions. We go to the Acropolis and like I'm looking at this place. The place is full of cats and like, you know, if you've ever been there, it's spectacular. And the weather is perfect. And I'm looking at the stairs leading up to the Acropolis. They must be like waist high. And I turned to this Greek guy and I said, what's up with the stairs? Like, why are the stairs so big? And he goes, because they were built by giants. And I said, that's the greatest answer I've ever heard in my life. Because immediately I imagined this giant walking up the steps building the Acropolis. And it was just wonderful. I was having this wonderful little moment. And I looked over, and about 20 feet away was Harley and his girlfriend staring at me with like hate in their eyes. I mean, she was looking at me like she was trying to bend me like a spoon. Like, remember how the psychics used to bend spoons?
Sure. Yeah.
That's how she was looking at me. And I just said to myself, I cannot see the world with these people. I cannot spend my life with this negativity. And you know what they were mad at me about? Because I was about to join Marilyn Manson.
There's the punchline. Bam.
So, hey, Parris, are you still playing music? You got any projects that you're still doing to this day?
You know, for about 6 years, I've been trying, or at least for the first couple of years, I was trying to put together a band. I played with a number of people. Me and Rob Buckley ended up playing together for a while, but that was just strange. He was always trying to pull me in he was like, we both like the Black Crowes. Let's play music like that. I was like, Black Crowes are cool. I just not what I do. I don't think I could do it if I tried. I can't really try. Can we just do this? And so I played with him for a while, and just one day he I had him. I had a good bass player, I had a good drummer. We finally found a singer. I get contacted by people all the time, as you can imagine. This one promoter down in South America was like, oh, I got a bunch of big open air festivals you can play with your new band. I was like, okay, great. And I told the guys, I was like, well, listen, we have 2 months. We can play this open air festival, play in front of 45,000 people. They're going to give us $15,000, which is, maybe not a huge amount, but for a band's first gig, shit, I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. All expenses paid, Sao Paulo, 10 days. And Rob was like, I quit. I said, what do you mean you quit? We're about to play these festivals. He goes, I don't think things are moving fast enough. I was like, you don't think they're moving fast enough? I don't understand what you're talking about. We're about to play a festival in Brazil on the beach, and it's going to be 45,000 people. We're going to get paid money. We're going to be flown there. You'd rather just hang out in Queens? And he was like, I'm sorry, that's it. And he quit. And then the singer who I had just gotten, he literally had just joined the band. He had written like one verse and chorus to one of my songs that was pretty damn good. I was like, oh, I love that. Write more. By the time we play the gig, you don't even have to write lyrics to everything. Just write one verse and one chorus for every song, and just repeat it all the way through. They won't even understand. It'll just be perceived as a song. Let's just get there. Short-term plan. Let's play this festival. And he goes to me, well, I just want you to know that I have a bunch of my own music written. I was like, oh, that's great. Show it to me. And he'd like strums a chord or two and sing some. I was like, yeah, but that's not a whole song. That's just like an idea of a song. We'd have to spend time to turn that into a song. We have a short-term plan. Here's 9 songs that are fully arranged. Just write lyrics to them. We'll play this gig. And after that, we'll work on your songs. He goes, okay. Comes back next week, has nothing written. I go, why don't you have anything written? He goes, I think you're using me. I go, what do you mean? He goes, I think you're using me to play your songs, and you have no intention of playing my songs. I was like, are you out of your mind? Are you fucking out of your mind? We're about to go play in front of 45,000 people, get paid $15,000, get hotels, and stay in South Hollow, South America. And you think I'm using you? Are you fucking out of your mind? And he looks at me and goes, well, that's what I think. I go, listen, man, I'm not in love with you. He said, what? I said, I'm not in love with you. So when you walk out the door, my heart is not going to be broken. So get the fuck out of my house. And that was the end of that guy. Wow. And I have equally as ridiculous, insane stories for 26 other guys that I played with. But over the course of that 6 years, I wrote quite a few songs. I have probably 15 completed songs that are fantastic. I'm super proud of. I just can't find people to play them. About 2 years ago, I was out in L.A. and Roy Mayorga from a variety of bands, I'm sure you know him.
Sure. Yeah.
He's like, hey, man, what are you doing? You got your guitar with you? I was like, yeah. He was like, come over and jam. Let's just jam in the afternoon. So I went over to his house, and I showed him one of my songs, and we jammed it for about an hour. And then he goes, you want to record it? I said, what do you mean? He goes, oh, this is the studio where we record Stone Sour. I said, you're kidding. He goes, oh, you're already going into the board. We can just play it one more time, and I'll just record it. I was like, all right. He hits record. We record it. We listen to it back. And I'm like, fucking God, this sounds great. It sounds like an album. He goes, yeah. He goes, you play bass? I go, yeah. He goes, all right, there's John's bass over there. Throw down a bass track. Threw down a bass track in one take. He goes, you want to multi-track the guitar? Yeah. Sit down. In like 2 hours, we had a fully recorded album quality song. And I just like sat there with my face in my hands. And he says, what's the matter? I said, I've been struggling with 36 knuckleheads to try to do something. And you and I do this in an afternoon. I said, if I spent 15 afternoons at your house, I would have an album. He's like, well, you know, if you lived in LA, we would be in a band together. And he goes, you know what the problem is, Parris? You're not playing with people on your level. And I said, but where do I find them? And there's the rub. I've been playing with, I was actually playing with this drummer for 2 years. This guy is so fucking talented. Super, like, he's like Joey Jorgensen. Like, I mean, that might be a little exaggeration because that guy's fucking spectacular. But this guy's really great too. And I played with him for like a year. And he has his own recording studio. He lives in the recording studio. And I sat down and played like 6 of my songs to a click. Perfectly. Guitars, bass. The entire song is guidelined out. And every time I talk to him, I'm like, why haven't you played drums on these tracks yet? And he plays me these other tracks, like this dance track and all these tracks. I was like, why haven't you played drums on these? He goes, well, I'm waiting for you to record the whole album, and then I'll start from the beginning and record the whole album. I was like, why don't you just play them as I go? I recorded some of these songs 6 months ago. Why haven't you recorded drums on them? You live here. You sit here all day long and play video games. Why don't you record? He goes, but that's just not the way I do things. I said, well, you clearly have a method, and I have a method. My method made me famous when I was 21. Your method isn't doing a goddamn thing. Mm-hmm. So please play drums on the track. Still nothing. A year goes by. He's got like 8 songs that I recorded, and he still hasn't played drums on anything. That's when I went to Roy's house, and I recorded that song with Roy, and I was just flabbergasted. But I posted a picture of me and Roy on Facebook, and I wrote underneath it, "Me and Roy tracked the song in his studio in LA." So a couple days later, I'm back in New York, and I get a text from my drummer. "Hey man, are we still playing together?" And I wrote back, "Yeah, why? Why would you ask?" He goes, "Oh, I don't know." He goes, "Oh, by the way, I recorded drums on one of those tracks." Like, he was so terrified by seeing me in a picture with Roy. That was the only thing that could get him to record this track. Mm-hmm. So he sends me the track, and it's fan-fucking-tastic. He's a great drummer. The recording is awesome. And I played it side by side with the one with Roy, and I said to myself, of course, when I had the one with Roy, I got all kinds of ideas in my head. Oh, I'll just release an EP. But I thought that would be disloyal to my drummer. So I took the Roy track and I pushed it off to the side. And I actually sent the new track to Roy, like, hey, man, isn't this great? The drummer was so terrified of you that he recorded a song. And he listened to it. He goes, oh, this is great. And Roy was like, hey, do you have the multi-track? Just send it to me. I'll play drums on it. And then I said, well, he did it. And it's great. And he's my drummer and he's here. And whatever it took to get him to do it, I think I should stick with him. And we'll see how he plays on the other 6 songs. So I turned Roy down for sending him the multi-track, which I can't figure out why the fuck I did it, because I'm a loyal guy. And for the next 6 months, I try to get my drummer to play on another one of these tracks, and I cannot fucking get him to do it. That's the kind of insane obstacles you do. And then I had this bass player for a while that was really good. And then one day I'm sitting at home, my phone rings, and it's this guy. He's like, I'm a manager. I manage Nick Menza. I was like, I know Nick. We wanted him to be in White Devil. We actually went to Nick's house and sat in his house, and it was the most peculiar thing in the world. Andy Summers, the booking agent, set up this meeting. We went, knocked on the door, and we went into Nick Menza's house. And Nick Menza's house, it's like Santa Claus's house. It's like little people running around, like doing things and building things. And it says Menza on the wall really big, and there are T-shirts. People silk screening T-shirts and a recording studio here. And Nick's in the corner, and he's running around like a maniac. Me and Harley are just standing there like, what the fuck is going on here? So we sit down with Nick Menza, and Nick Menza looks at me and he goes, so I listened to your White Devil, and I love it. It's great. He goes, but I got a $2,800 nut here. $2,800 nut. $2,800 every month to keep this place running. You can look around you. You can see there's a lot going on. I need $2,800 a month. Trans-Siberian Orchestra will give me $2,800 a month. But I would rather be in a real rock band. Can you give me $2,800 a month? And me and Harley were like, well, we're just starting out. We don't even have the deal yet. We're looking for somebody who wants to be a member, equal, and we think that you could do that. He goes, so no $2,800, huh? I go, not in the beginning. He goes, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, it is. And we shook his hand and we left. But this bass player, I was playing with this bass player, and of course, 25 years later, this must have been 2 or 3 years ago. I get this phone call. This guy's like, I manage Nick Menza and Chris Poland. I was like, wow, that's awesome. I love Chris Poland. Fucking great guitar player. He was always a super nice guy. Had a drug problem, but I can't seem to avoid that. So he says, this is what we have in mind. We want to see what you're doing. And, Chris Poland mentioned you. He said that at one point he was going to be in the Cro-Mags. We were going to have him replace Doug Holland on Best Wishes album, but I fought that and we kept Doug. He goes, but we want to see what's going on with you. And I was like, okay, well, Nick Menza and Chris Poland. I know Chris Poland's a spectacular guitar player, but who's writing the songs? He goes, well, we were just wondering, if you had any riffs lying around, maybe you could send them to us and we could check them out. I was like, oh, so you don't want me to join their band. You want them to join my band. And he goes, well, what do you mean? Why do you have to put it that way? I was like, well, you said that I was joining their band, but you want me to be the songwriter. And he goes, well, I mean, if you want to look at it that way. I was like, how else do you look at it? I said, if we were all going to play together, I have a bass player. I've been writing, I've been playing, and again, my loyalty kicked in. I was like, my bass player's got to be part of the deal. And they were like, well, we were going to get the bass player from Whitesnake. And I was like, well, does he write songs? And he goes, oh, no. And I said, well, it sounds like you need my bass player because he comes with me. And that was the end of that conversation. And obviously Nick Menza passed away very soon after that. Sorry to hear, but that's the kind of bizarre shit that I get dealt with. I mean, it's a combination of people who self-sabotage. It's a combination of me being loyal to people who self-sabotage, which I obviously have a history of. But the overarching thing that is the most important is I have all this music written. And as soon as I find people that I can play them with, it'll be out there. But I don't really see any rush because I always hope to and strive to make songs that it doesn't matter when they're recorded or when they were written. I would hope if I released World Peace today, it would still ring people's bell.
Well, hey, man, I really appreciate, I think it's coming up a little over 2 hours here, so maybe we'll get ready to wrap this up. Is there anything you want to add to this, Parris, before we wrap things up?
Just that, I'm extremely grateful that you guys want me to appear on your show. I'm grateful that people still enjoy my music. I'm grateful that people enjoyed it to begin with. And that's what I'm left with. And I'm happy to have experienced it.
Yeah.
I try to disconnect myself from any of the fighting, bickering, wrestling, and I'd rather just hang on to that, which is such a great thing.
Yeah, no, and listen, man. I'm really glad you did come on. Like I said, unfortunately, people really haven't heard your side of things. It's usually just from the other two guys. So I'm really glad you came on with us, and you got to tell us all these great stories. Everyone's gonna, I know that our listeners are gonna love to hear what you've had to say the last couple hours. And me and Bob, we really appreciate it, man. Really, really do. And
yeah, absolutely, Parris. I mean, that was just incredible, being so honest and straightforward with, so it's great to get, your side of the story and for you to come forward and give us such an elaborate story about, the whole history about the Cro-Mags. Thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. And I wanted to, make sure people, like I said, you definitely do not get enough credit because you don't seek out attention for yourself. I think because of that, and because, like I said, you do have a life outside of the music world, they don't, like I said, a lot of people just equate those other two with the Cro-Mags, and people need to know that you and Harley were the main songwriters, and to me, the Cro-Mags, what sticks out to me is the guitar, and it always has.
Absolutely.
And that's all you, man. You're responsible for that, and thank you for putting out just great, records throughout the years. I still listen to those albums all the time, and just really appreciate, you doing that for your fans. And it was great talking to you.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, man. We'll take care. Really. All right. Have a good one, Parris. Appreciate it.
You too.
All right.
All right, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. Subscribe and listen to all episodes by going to our pages on iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and more. You can listen to all other episodes and access up-to-date information and news on the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast by going to our website at www.shockwaveskullsessions.com. Email all comments, questions, and suggestions to shockwaveskullsessions@gmail.com.